a bit special today. You will listen to Michel Godet. Michel is a professor. He's also a member of the Academies of Technologies and creator of the Cercle d'Entrepreneurs du Futur. Some will say is provocative, or that he awakens the common sense that we have in ourselves and that we put to sleep. Anyway, he is nevertheless listening to the good news of the territories and companies, and I think we thought this would be interesting to share it with you today. And he has a notion of what does it mean to be an entrepreneur in 2014, and this is fine with us to hear this vision of entrepreneurship. Michel Godet, please come on stage.
Well, I must confess that since I arrived last night, I realized that I had to completely rewrite my presentation, because, what I intended to say was not at all what was expected from me. So, I spent some long hours working on it, and it's true that I had such a warm welcome last night, and, it's great. I mean, it's wonderful hearing those young kids. I mean, and I'm so good at cooking that I no longer cook, because my wife is a much better cook than myself, and she's right here in the room, and she says, and there's cooking and what happens after cooking is everything that gets left on the counter. So my job is about prospective. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what it means. Okay. So I'm going to talk to the future to be built. Talk about the food of the future, and that was somewhat technocratic and technological, so I've kind of kept that short. But on the other hand, I'll talk about food, how it links people to one another, and I'll illustrate it with a few pieces of good news, because I am actually a creator, and I actually moderate the Circle of Entrepreneurs of the Future, and so every 2 years we organize meetings where we give some good news, and I'm going to give you 3 pieces of good news that it's actually it's a pepper from Espelette, and it totally changed their lives in the Basque country, and in the case of the Basque pork, and there'll be a prize revealed on the 3rd of December, but don't tell it. This is a special pepper of Espelette. So is he here, Arnaud? So this is the pepper of Espelette. And also talk to you about the fish sausage and Creole merguez, the sushi of the Réunion Island in a country. And I'll say a few words of the Cercle des Entrepreneurs. So first of all, what about the future? And so careful, because it's not because we know who wrote a quote that you can put African proverb or Asian proverb. I mean, you just be open about it and say you don't know who it is. And so again, that famous saying, so Saint-Exupéry actually wrote it, but he actually took inspiration in another proverb. So it's about that famous saying that the earth doesn't belong to us, but it's just there for us to hand on to the next generation. And so we can't say what's going to happen, but it's just to shed light on and to anticipate problems, to avoid it. Good prospect is not the one that happens, but that leads to the action that will actually prevent it from happening. And when you actually announce that there's an iceberg, it's to avoid it. And this is a saying by Seneca: there is no favorable wind for him who does not know where he's going. And the problem that in today's age, we don't know where we're going anyway, and we've accumulated goods that doesn't lead to any links between us. So saying we're looking for the meaning, but people are trying to actually serve themselves. These are the industry. So 3 studies that we have to distinguish from the other, because it's the 3 together that you have to be reactive, because there are emergencies that prop up any minute, all the time. So that's, the more the sort of emergency, it's more the firefighter type job. And again, don't forget, when the fire has been extinguished, what's actually created much more damage is the water rather than the fire. And so we saw it with Sarkozy. I mean, whether you like him or not, but he was a good crisis manager. But we have 500,000 million euros billion debts. So we know that it cannot last. It's not sustainable. Again, and sustainable development today is, what's happening together is taking into our future children's pockets to enrich ourselves. Preactive, we have to prepare to the expected change. We know that the Europe is aging, even a demographic suicide in Italy, not so far from us. So 1.4 children per woman. What are we waiting for? Nothing. That's how the Japanese, who are ahead of us, are going to lose 30 million people by 2015. What do we do? Nothing. We're talking about, the dead of Fukushima. We're not talking about the 30 million who are going to disappear. Proactivity is about acting to provoke the desired changes. So you act according to a specific aim or project. And so this is very important. The more we refuse to admit what's coming, the more we have a problem to get out of it. So this is what I tell companies: when you have actually a tax control, then when they ask questions and you think about what you're going to answer, and while you think, perhaps they're going to forget about asking the next question. So 5 questions versus the future, fundamental questions, and who am I? And how to go about doing it. Those are the ones I've underlined. What may happening? Well, there'll never be an answer. We'll only know. We'll only know it after the fact. And first question, that I'll be illustrating. Who am I? And don't actually. This is Beirut before and after the presidential elections. You have to. And so again, our elites have quite a lot of work to do. Those who are in Bercy, and I'm in competition with the cartoonist and he's going to actually get revenge, I'm sure, after my talk. So, and again, and those people who've learned economics in books, it's like the cook who all he's done is to follow recipes on paper. Nothing replaces transmission, experience, and doing things yourself. And so what you will have understood as well, and that's what I've been learning, that you have to be able to turn your weaknesses into strengths, and we have to we have to start from ourselves. And I'll go even further in the book the story of Bashir Kaoumi, a blind man who did a thesis with me on disability, a difference to turn into something positive, and a disability, a difference to turn into a strength. So he said, when you put a blind man in a division, it actually increases the productivity of the division, but the suspensive condition is the blind man has to be recruited by the manager and not the social services, because social services live because you have the handicapped, the disabled people, and they want the disabled to remain disabled. There's a book, the preamble by Michel Godet, and we have a web sourd, the France of Good News in Toulouse, where Airbus recruits people who are deaf, because again the sign language is actually faster and more efficient. Some actually learn sign language, and the president of WebSour was not actually deaf, but by actually expressing himself all the time in sign language, he actually could no longer talk. So very important on Bashir Kaoumi. And again, what can I do where I am? So let's stop lamenting ourselves. Help yourself. You'll be helped. So these are the so this explains many differences, and all the men and women talk. And again, God helps only those who help themselves. So let's stop complaining all the time. And instead of just, you've got to actually, pull your socks up instead of always complaining. So it has to do a lot with the mindset. So the problem is that you have a project, whatever it is, you need to work together. And again, weakness comes from division, and you have to, get people enthusiastic around you, and you have to go there together. It's, it's the path that leads there that's important, and the path is the objective. And unity creates strength. So there's a new world ahead of us. We'll have to change most things. So the third wave of innovation, comparable to the Belle Époque and Renaissance, the difference is that this time, we're completely off track. Okay, I mean, you're laughing, but there's nothing funny about it. But I mean, in a world that changes, if we refuse to change, we disappear. So there are crises today, and in the face of changes, we don't want to change anything. And in our behaviors, I think we have to question ourselves, and we shouldn't just we actually should be able to control them and even provoke them, and be more efficient. And in terms of public services, we have to do more and better and spend less. And do benchmarking as other countries do it. And in order to adopt best practices, you have to train people. And we're actually going backwards, but that's another topic. So I'll start with the good news. So on the whole, as regards the future, there are 7 good news. I'm going to dwell on all of this, but I'd like to remember, maybe you haven't realized this, but and I was 20 years in 1968, and it was full of, it created a lot of anxiety. And from eastern Germany to the Pacific end, there was Spain, it was Franco, Portugal with Salazar, and we were hardly out of the Colonels, and in South America it was a dictatorship. And so there's much more democracy, and let's be very happy with it. 100 millions of Chinese are out of misery, and of course it creates other types of problem. And so this was a very anxiety-provoking climate. Nevertheless, I remember what my grandfather, who was in the First World War, used to say to me at the time: your problem is that you lack nothing, and in fact you're crying with your mouth full. And 44 years additional life expectancy to live. Since 1980, 5 years extra, and we have 4 more years life expectancy by 2030. It's worth waiting until 2030 then. So let's stop crying and lamenting ourselves and complaining. And my children consider me as a caveman. When I used to say, when I was a child, I didn't wash. I used to just slap water on my face, because there was only one faucet with cold water. They think I'm lying, but they can't even imagine what it was like to it. And it makes them more fragile. It doesn't certainly go to toughening them up. And we all complain about the crisis. 50% we have more to live than in 1980, and we're sad, we're miserable, because we're never, and we're happy with what we are, but we're more frustrated with what we don't have. When my neighbor buys a big car, my my quality of life goes down. We're in a society now of frustration, and so we have a lot of work to do on ourselves, and to be happy with what one has, and especially and the more one has, you're not happy. I mean, I've organized a seminar for the sad rich people, and there's nothing sadder than the person rich. And poor can hope becoming rich, but a rich who was poor and has become rich, he has no more friends. He doesn't know how to play golf. Okay, he knows how to play golf, but he has no one to play pétanque or boule with. So I think, we need to think about all of this. I mean, don't laugh. I mean, this is, real life experience, what I'm telling you about. I'm not rich, and I don't know how to play boules either. So, the young people, I mean, aging is good. I mean, again, we're living young, but longer and longer. So ladies who are in this room, I mean, just remember what I'm going to say to you. Every woman remain young. They all remain young. It depends on the age of the man who looks at her. So at 67 years old now, I mean, 50-year-old women seem much younger than when I was 20 years old. Naturally. It has to do with the beholder, the age of the beholder. And it's when you're 65 years old, it's not good to look at 20-year-old women as if they were objects of desire, when in fact, they are objects of pleasure, of human pleasure, visual pleasure, and except Dominique Strauss-Kahn, of course, but I am not Dominique Strauss-Kahn. I think nature works well. So you have to always be positive about what happens to us. I have an example. My grandfather said, okay, and there's many more fish in the sea. And there's there's a lot of expensive oil. I mean, at the time. So. So there was a 45 years reserve of oil when it was $87 per barrel. In June 2008, at $150 a barrel, there was 150 years of proven reserves of oil with a standard, between 1 and 4 centuries. The more it's expensive, the more there is. I mean, that's the good news. It's not caviar that's too expensive. It's because we don't have enough money to pay for it. And the bad news is that we'll have to completely change the way we're organized and behavior, and the dispersed habitat that we have on the hills is a problem. And in the hinterland today, poverty, people live far because they don't have much money, and they can't come back to the city center to go to the doctor or dentist. So we're going to have the new poor people in the countries of the north, and this is very this worries the elected officials. Another good news is that shale gas is 2 times cheaper, but leave it to the future generations. That's a nice present. We don't want it, we'll have to close down all the chemical industries, chemical plants in the Rhone Valley. But that's not the topic for today. Okay, and he plays golf with pétanque boule, but already golf balls are dangerous. So imagine the boule. So and shale gas is getting cheaper by the day. So the major markets in the mature countries is solitude and aging, is security of goods and people, and when you have security, you don't have a quality of life. And I don't have time to show this. And people leave certain territories because they don't feel secure. And the future is going to be the and we're talking about the functional. So it's neither a secondary or tertiary, but you have services that incorporate the goods. And Michelin rents tires to the haulier. This is what's called the quaternary sector. And so it's better for him to sell tires that actually last as long as possible, as opposed to those tires that would wear faster. And the green market and ethical market. So again, our modern societies are very rich in goods and poor in links. And so if we talk about soft growth in Europe, it's going to force us to think about the qualitative content of growth. Better drink less wine, but a better quality wine. And I think it's a bit the same for the content of growth and questions about more and more interactive solitude, thanks to the information technologies. And we're closer with new technologies, but we don't have anyone close to talk to. Close ones to talk to. I mean, those who are taking them. If everybody's on the answering machine, I mean, nobody talks to one another, and it's actually so in the corporate world, and people send each other emails from one office to another, and he goes into the next door office and, did you get my email? And you say to him, what, did you see my answer? Oh no. So he goes back to his office to get the answer, of course. And he understands that the next time he'll have to operate differently, and it's better to talk to one another. So we've destroyed the relationship between human beings, and it makes people really very, very unhappy. So in this country, so it's one. Thanks to you have areas where people can meet, and I was a professor for 32 years, and said, we came to your class and we met there and we married. Okay, we don't know what they've remembered from the class I gave, but again, a majority of people are living alone today. So the internet, for me, is actually a trash can for information, and you can find everything in a trash can. So why spend one time in trash cans looking for stuff? Nevertheless, we need a trash can at home. So you see, my position is pretty relative about this. So these are the people who live alone. 40 million people living alone in 2030. 40% of people who live on their own, representing 11.5 million people. This is a real problem. And we'll end up having a policy, with, again, you'll have the elderly without children, and they become orphans, so they'll say, adopt an old person. And, again, the motto for Court-bouillon will be adopt an old person, and again, social cohesion and security of goods and persons, intensity of life in the associations and cultural. And the place where one has the best life is Mayenne. If you ask people in France, majority of the French people, are... and they're more pessimistic than Afghans, which is very sad, so in the Mayenne, this is one of the poorest territories in France, but since everybody, is actually being paid the minimum salary, it's the second territory in terms of fertility, after the Seine-Saint-Denis, but there's other reasons there. So they're happy, and dispersed habitats of small cities, very important, and you see a lot of them are actually running away from the north. They go south, east, center. It depends on the salaries. And some go to the Gers, people from the north, because they discover, like the guys in Lille. Yes. Okay, I've seen it. Thinking that they're going to actually gain in life expectancy. But, if... if your blood vessels are clogged up, it's not because you're going to actually travel south that it's going to get better. My cousin wasn't any older than you, but... So France, very often it's actually presented as an agro-touristic country. It's land. It's good. We're good for touristic. We're third for recipes. For revenues. We don't have enough added value in terms of services in France. And for agro-food, there's a deterioration. We're the third country for exports. We're the second. So it's Netherlands actually have a revenues income twice the amount as ours. But, the value that's recouped is half of what the Netherlands gets. So we have to work on our productivity. So I'm not going to insist on innovation. And I showed it in a report of the economic analysis. Innovation is just technical and is secondary. It's 20% technical and 80% is social, organizational, financial, and commercial. So, for food, there'll be innovation. But the products of the future, I remember in 1970, we were thinking of how we're going to live in 2000. And we thought we'd be, eating pills, swallowing pills, and things haven't really changed. The basics. We, tend to over-assess the changes. So you can't see what's on this chart. Doesn't matter. But in 40 years' time, people spend twice as less for their food. So certain things cost more, housing, information technology. And that has actually was impact of the crisis. So again, there's a fast food and munching and we'll see this later on. But 70% of the French people actually eat at home at lunchtime. This is good news actually, because when you see what you eat when you go out, and that's how I see it. So there's certain trends again, and again, there's huge inequalities. Again, the more, the less money you have, again, the worse food you eat, and problems with overweight because people eat bad foods, but pleasure has not disappeared. And there are sustainable or durable values, and again, there's issues such as practicality, and the one who eats is actually feeling uneasy, and there's environmental pressure. You shouldn't eat this; you're going to destroy nature, and religious pressure. And there's places where you don't eat pork, and cultural pressure as well. Legal pressure, media-related pressure. Again, palm oil today, and many questions about this, as you well know. And I don't know. I don't really think we're going to actually feed ourselves with pills. And again, there's pleasure, and whether they're pink or blue or the pills, I don't think it changes much. And again, basically, life is going to be based on work, the feeling of belonging, and what else can I say? And yes, and there's a growing autonomy of choices in families. Each, actually does their own dish. people don't eat the same thing. Certain kids, I don't know if you have children, but when you ask what do you want, and he wants something different, he finally goes and buys what he wants. And so people eat together, but they don't have the same food in their plates. So there's also pleasure, and beef, cheeks of beef. My wife is a specialist. Again, you have to be in a society where people trust each other. And this is the book that some of you have already been given, and the other book that's downstairs, the France of Good News. So like Tintin, I send out good news. So there's one book coming out which is going to be called The Grand Prix. 2014 as the news stories. So so as far as good news go, some great things, terrific things. I tell the story of Les Occitanes, just down the road from here, the country with lovely scents, and I also tell the story of someone who is in his own little corner, and he's done well in preventive health and active health. Is by eating that one looks after oneself, and food can become preventive, and you can divide actually a sick leave by 3 and threefold, and we can also, I'm sure we could be able to reduce cardiovascular events, and we have a 30% more consumption of salt in our country than other European countries. We eat 3 times more salt. All this is pretty good news, and I just want to mention the story of Sodebo, something small little delicatessen on a country road, and has become an industry. I mean, you all know Sodebo. And I don't have much time to dwell on any of this. And the story of the pepper of Espelette. And so I'd like to just focus on 2 or 3 stories here. So Espelette, I mean, you all know the pepper of Espelette. This is in the southwest part of France, in the Pays Bas. So it started with, with some chums who, again, girls had left and tourists had gone, and because they start getting bored, when they were young. So they actually organized, the feast of the pepper feast, and this was local stuff, to actually for brine, for the use of brine, and they discovered it, and they went to see those who did the ham of Bayonne, and they were sponsored, and so today we have. In 2013, 145 tons produced with 170 producers, 500 kilos and there was, in 1965, there's only 500 kilos. So you see a long road, and the story of this, so it's 120 euros per kilo. A little jar of 20 grams of this pepper of Espelette costs 50 euros. So, the town is 2,000 people, 20 shops, 34 shops in 1980, and 55 stores today in the Espelette. And every day in the summer you have, busloads full of people. And of course, you have, special AOC, which is a special controlled origin. And this is work that lasted 30 years under the former mayor of Espelette, called Andy Tayeridou, and he actually was the sort of team leader, but quite an adventure here, and it totally changed the Espelette, unbelievable. And Andy Tayeridou, he actually was behind the project this year, and the renaissance of the new breed of Basque pork. So he was became a local butcher, and he's walking around in the agricultural show, and he realized that there were 6 breeds of pigs in France, and one which is a Basque pig. Never heard about this simply because it had disappeared, and it had 120,000 in 1920 and completely disappeared from the face of the earth, this pig. And you can easily understand, a pig, who breeds in 15 months as the Basque pig, black, with the hanging ears, flop flop. And this one, I mean, the white pig takes 8 months to produce piglets. So the Basque pig, if it's like this, the Spanish pigs, who are, walking around in the truffle fields and the oak field. So he actually reconstructed the biotope, and today, 4 years they asked it to be, have this protected label, a certified label, and for 4 years, they went to the agricultural show, and at the beginning of the 90s, to actually have people taste this Basque pig for free, and people, would go to the stand. It has nothing to do with what one has in our plates today, the white pig. White ham, fantastic success, a whole range of products around the Basque pig, because people realized, what real taste was, and formidable experience here. And so, we have 70 producers with 5,000 Basque pig. It has nothing to do with the 120,000 that were being produced in the 1920s. So last example, and so in the Ile de la Réunion, and actually people don't eat fish there, or either they're eaten by the big fish like the shark, but they don't eat fish, and so this is a young girl, as in all lovely stories. She had health problems. She wasn't able to do the hotel management school she wanted to do. She wasn't able to do the business school, for health reasons. But she transformed her weaknesses into strengths, and she loved cooking. And finally, she analyzed the situation, and she was able to understand problems, even complicated problems, and she said, well, what could I do? And after many problems and hurdles, but her father, who was in the construction sites, he helped her, and he was a real entrepreneur, and the banks said no, because she wanted to start a fishing activity, and the bank said no, and so she is actually involved in she sells actually fish sausages and sushis. I haven't tasted them yet, but from a product like white tuna or albacore white tuna. So she, by putting the famous pepper or other spices from the Caribbean, and she actually, she got everybody to start tasting fish again, appreciating fish again, and so she was wonderful, this woman. And so, okay, I'll finish. Okay, I've got 5 more minutes to go. Fine. Yes, I knew that. I was told 10 minutes 5 minutes ago. So obviously 10 minus 5 leaves me 5 minutes. These messages are really stressing me out. Stop. Okay, obviously, I knew I had 5 minutes left. Since 5 minutes ago, I had 10 minutes left.
So we're not missing ideas. How to go into action? How do we do this? And to go from anticipation to action, to go from green to blue, simply you need the yellow of appropriation, simply. A good idea, it's an issue of method, you have to have a link. If you don't have appropriation, there is rejection. And in fact, there is one way to facilitate appropriation is to have a good meal. Actually, let's have a good meal. So when I used to do seminars, of strategic coaching for companies, I would do this in the, I call it the good idea auberge. It's not something, it's not something where you sleep well because you don't have much time to sleep anyways. It's something where you have good food, good drinks. So you just keep going on in the evening, with the after coffee liquor and brandy, and that's nice. And that's what we do. We do our work, and to facilitate appropriation, where you have to have different values. To motivate people, you need people who see clearly things, who have great values, but you also have to make sure that they will accept it. You need a good mix of both. And if you don't have that, you'll have nothing. There will be no appropriation. It can be difficult to have only hot values. You could hit the wall with a lot of enthusiasm, actually. You have to be very cautious. You have to, don't always go for people who are like you. Often in a couple, you got never 2 ants or two seagulls. Often you got the seagull and the ant. Well, look for the seagull or look for the ant. That's the issue. Now, just a quick word to finish about the Cercle des Entrepreneurs du Futur, the Future Entrepreneurship Club. Basically, this called the Evergetism And in antiquity, rich people would ruin themselves for the general interest. You know, this is why you got aqueducts and Roman theater. You need to be able to do donation, because if there is nothing free, something is missing. And altruism is something very suspect today. When you do something for altruism, say, well, why is he doing this? What's hiding there? You know, it's mental health, actually, to be able to give. So you have to, you know, make sure that rich people are ready to give. I mean, make sure that they come back, because so far, you know, they've run away. So get the rich back, and then they will give you money. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I created this future entrepreneur club, or entrepreneurs club of the future, and they would used to give me money. They put me on a website. We put all the software, prospective methods, strategies, scenarios, probability calculation in 3 languages, and 70,000 downloading. We've translated the book on strategic perspective in Arabic and Chinese. So it's not just the Quran in Arabic. You know, there's my book as well, that you can learn the Quran with the book on perspective together. You know, light is everywhere. And then we organized this great prize of good news and territories with all the players, you know, all the players who are around development and initiatives and solidarity and so on and so forth. And this is my note of conclusion. Thank you so much. And I'm ready for questions.